Welcome to the In My Opinion show. I'm your host, Ronald Robinson. With us, we have three of the most distinguished people in the nation, beginning with Miss Martone Hatter.
Good evening, Ron.
Next, we have Mr. Henry Banker.
It's Terry Banker, Ron. Glad to know you.
Okay, me too. Next, we have Mr. Henry Hatter.
Hi, Ron.
Welcome all to In My Opinion. Miss Coretta Scott King was laid to rest. She was the widow of Martin Luther King Jr. Our prayers go out to the family. Politics makes an appearance at King funeral. Some speakers took shots at Bush's policies. Speakers seized on the presence of President Bush to attack his policies at the funeral of Coretta Scott King, the First Lady of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. With one current and three former presidents in attendance, some speakers at Coretta Scott King's funeral got political. Jimmy Carter, one of the four presidents to speak, took a jab at Bush's domestic eavesdropping program during 6 hours of sermons and speeches, and song for the late widow of Nobel Peace Laureate Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated in 1968. The 10,000 mourners also heard the Reverend Joseph Lowery, a civil rights leader, cite Mrs. King's legacy as a champion of racial equality while launching barbs at the Bush administration policies on Iraq and health care. With Washington debating the legality of Bush's domestic eavesdropping on Americans suspected of ties to Al-Qaeda, Carter drew spirited applause with comments on federal efforts to spy on the Kings decades ago. It was difficult for them personally with the civil liberties of both husband and wife violated, and they became the targets of secret government wiretapping and other surveillances, Carter said. Joseph Lowery, former head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which Martin Luther King Jr. helped found in 1957, said, "We know now there were no weapons of mass destruction over there, but Coretta knew, and we know that there are weapons of misdirection right down here. Millions without health insurance, poverty abounds. War, billions more, but no more for the poor." Born April 27, 1927, in Marion, Alabama, Coretta Scott King played a backup role in the civil rights movement until her husband, a Baptist minister, was gunned down in Memphis in 1968. As millions watched around the world, Coretta Scott King's funeral, was it a place to discuss politics? Martone, what is your opinion?
Well, first, I have a slight problem with Coretta Scott King playing a backup role. Without Coretta Scott King, there wouldn't have been Martin Luther King. I don't believe he would have been as strong as he was. However, I do not feel that her funeral was the time nor place to bring up any political instigations of any kind, whether or not there were weapons of mass destruction found. Basically, it didn't have the place. That was not the time nor the place to discuss, to have a political forum. And this was her funeral, and she was royalty, and she should have gone. She went out just like a very honored woman, and I feel that the Reverend should have respected her and her family more by not introducing such political nonsense.
Terry, what is your opinion?
I think that a high-profile funeral demonstrated the essence of the King legacy. Look what happened. White politicians were held accountable at the casket of a black woman on national and international TV with millions of people watching. What a greater final statement for a king to make than to say that we rose our people up to an equality, if not a superiority, person to person, and to hold white politicians accountable. I was all for it. And what I also saw was that for a lot of whites, it would have been the first time to see the real essence of the tone and tenor of a black funeral, of the comments from the pastors within the context of having the white leadership present. I think it was a demonstration of equality, and an absolute demonstration that she was the queen.
Henry, what is your opinion?
You know, I hope you got a chance to listen to, and I hope your audience got a chance to listen to the previous comments by the previous two speakers. What they said was powerful. The American people needed to hear that. The only way that Martin Luther King could ever, or Mrs. King could ever be, to achieve the level of truly being recognized as a gift from God, is for all people to elevate him up beyond the individual interest to small groups. Terry said people from all over came, and they gave him this great honor. Mrs. King, in this case, Mrs. King, this great honor, which she deserved. There was no room for politics, and I think it was a show of discomfort with some of the people who were given individual speaking roles. But, you know, and I think that they should have left the politics out of it. What most people will remember is not the elevation of Coretta King, but those swipes at politics there. They will remember that because we all do, just as you brought it up tonight. Had it been, like Abraham Lincoln said, people will, the world will live no long remember what we say here, but they will never forget what we did here. And that's where we wanted to go. We want to leave that legacy there as something monumental, to remember this great person for all times among all nations.
But we have to understand it wasn't just black politicians making comments. It was a white man, former President Carter, also told Bush that he was wrong.
I know, but then they didn't recognize the protocol of the church in a funeral. They should have. Because I doubt whether a black man would go into a white church and swipe at the president when all of his peers are white. It's just not protocol. And that should have been stopped.
We're going to change subjects now. What in the world is going on in the Flint Public Schools? Flint Public Schools suspends hundreds of kindergartners, preschool, and Head Start students. This is totally unacceptable. These are babies. For the school year ending in 2005, the Flint school system had suspended 20,189 students according to the Flint Journal. That's more than the total enrollment of the entire Flint school system. Flint school officials' explanations for these suspensions are that they must send a strong message that poor behavior won't be tolerated. The poor behavior is not with the student population alone, it is also with officials that condone this barbaric and negative behavior of suspensions. These suspensions are denying our precious resources, children, and education. There are other alternatives to suspension. A moratorium should be instantly instituted against suspensions, and those suspension-happy adults/idiots should be made answerable to the parents and citizens of this city. In other words, do your jobs. Flint already has over a 50% dropout rate. We cannot allow any further erosion of our young, precious resources. Martone, what is your opinion?
Well, first I want to clarify that it stated that there were 2 pre-kindergartners that were suspended. And those are separate, that's separate from Head Start, because there are no suspensions in Head Start. However, I think as an educator for the Flint Community School System myself, you've got to take a lot into consideration. You said that suspension is barbaric. As with any job, there is proper protocol. And at least in the school in which I teach, that protocol is followed. A kid is not going to hit another child and then it's, bam, you're suspended. They're given numerous warnings. You're also taught to talk and engage in proper conversation with the parents. Part of that problem is the proper conversation isn't taking place. Where the teachers are trying to talk to the parent is very quick to jump to the defense of his or her child.
But isn't it a normal reaction?
It is a normal reaction, but as the boy that was stated in the paper hitting the assistant principal and having the grandmother say, well, he demands respect. Well, you know, he demands respect. Do the teachers demand respect as well? Aren't they the ones educating the children? I don't know too many teachers that just openly disrespect the children. Yes, we're supposed to respect everybody, but when you've got a student in kindergarten telling you using just atrocious words, and then you have the parent come in, and instead of listening to you, the parent is now using the same horrible vernacular with you, not only in front of his child or her child, but in front of the group of children. Where's the responsibility then? Where does the responsibility fall? If that child is suspended for using horrible language, and that child it's gone on for months, and there's a 3-day suspension, I don't feel we're at fault.
But we're talking about over 20,000 children being suspended in a school year.
But we're talking about a lot of different children. We're talking about there are a lot of reasons as to why these suspensions are taking place. As long as you can follow the proper protocol and the procedure and the administrators in place have done so, then I don't feel that is, whether they're 20,000 or not, we need to start looking at maybe how we parent as a society. How are we parenting our children? Children should not be taught you're going to fight the teacher. Because the teachers, you don't like what the teacher said, you just tell me, I'll fix it. That's not proper. I have a son who's in 1st grade. If he has a problem, he knows himself there's a proper protocol to follow. If you have a problem at school, come to an adult. Go to an adult. If another kid hits you, don't strike back. You go find an adult. If that doesn't work, then when you come home, you talk to your grandfather, your grandmother, you talk to your parents. If that doesn't work, then we can all sit down together and find out what's happening. It's called stability. And that's what's lacking in those 20,000 suspensions. That's what's lacking. At the core of that is stability. And until we as a community can figure out how to stabilize our children more, we're going to keep getting suspensions. It's just going to keep going downhill. It's not just one thing. There are a lot of different factors, and we need to take all of that into consideration. The resources are out there, but we need to take all of that into consideration, including the attrition rate. I mean, the mobility rate, 43%. That's a lot of moving. That's a lot of moving.
Terry, what is your thoughts on this?
I think we have to take a look at where we are, not where we want to be. Where we want to be is with caring, loving parents that nurture children, send them off to school. The children are well fed, they have ample sleep, and the parents